Hello, I'm Stanley Pranin of Aikido Journal, and welcome to another video blog. The subject of today's discussion is whether or not weapons should have a place in Aikido training. Now, there's two basic schools of thought on this. The first and the major proponent is the Aikikai Honbu Dojo and the current Doshu Morihiro Ueshiba. The idea is that taijutsu, or empty-handed techniques, form the basic core of Aikido training. So any practice of weapons like the aiki-ken or jo or even the knife is subordinate to this main essential core consisting of the taijutsu techniques. The other major viewpoint is that of actually the founder of Aikido and then one of his major students, Morihiro Saito sensei, and that is that the weapons form an integral part of the overall Aikido system, and that the weapons and the taijutsu cannot be separated in any meaningful way, that Aikido itself is a composite system in which weapons play an important role, and also in a conceptual sense, because many techniques are perceived to have derived from the sword. So I think if we want to try to answer the question of whether or not we should practice weapons, really a good way of approaching it is to understand a bit of the history. Now, to give you some historical background, Morihiro Ueshiba, also known as O-sensei, was practicing weapons virtually all of his career. And especially in the mid to late 30s, he gave special attention to the practice of weapons. For example, in 1937, he actually enrolled in a classical kobudo system called Kashima Shinto-ryu. And when I interviewed the headmaster of the art, I actually saw the enrollment page where Morihei affixed his blood imprint on the page to signify his seriousness as a student. So he went this far in actually joining an art and observing the training at the Kobukan Dojo, where he had teachers from the Kashima Shinto-ryu school come in. And among the practitioners were Kishomaru Ueshiba, the second Doshu, and also Zenzaburo Akazawa. Now, if another indication of where Morihei's thinking was going is the 1938 manual called Budo. This consists of 50 techniques, and in the back of the book there are a number of paired sword practices and also some techniques where the juken or the mock bayonet are used. So he's already thinking deeply about the weapons training, mainly the sword and the staff and the bayonet. If we fast forward a few years to 1942, when he retired in Iwama, from this point forward for many years he gave a great deal of emphasis to the practice of primarily the aiki-ken and the aiki-jo. And this we have the testimony of many people, including Kishomaru Ueshiba and of course Morihiro Saito sensei, who was one of his closest students in the pre-war period and who also served as his partner for many of these sessions that would take place outdoors, with the two of them using the aiki-ken or the aiki-jo. So the founder himself, when he was putting the final touches, if we can say this, to the aikido that he called takemusu aiki, then weapons are definitely a very important part of that, because the founder included them as an integral part of his training and taught them to one of his primary students. Now, as you may know, Saito sensei then later on took these forms that he learned from the founder, some of which were in fragmentary form, and developed and codified these into the system that we often refer to as Iwama Aikido, which has many sword and staff kata, the aiki-ken and the aiki-jo. So why didn't the practice of weapons become more generalized? Well, there's some other reasons. let's take a look at what was happening at the Aikikai Hombu Dojo in Tokyo in the post-war period. Understand that soon after the war, the GHQ prohibited the practice of martial arts. So Morihei was kind of stuck in Iwama and was doing more personal training. And of course, Saito Sensei and a few of the other old-timers from that era got some of the weapons practice. But he didn't really start appearing in Tokyo until the mid-1950s, so there was this long gap. So many of the teachers who joined during that period recognized that weapons did have a part in Aikido, certainly from the standpoint of the founder, and they went to outside sources to study, for example, the sword or the staff. And some of them, for example, Seigo Yamaguchi practiced Kashima Shinryu, and then others, notably, let's see, I have a list here. Shoji Nishio, Nobuyoshi Tamura, Kazuo Chiba, Mitsunari Kanai. These people studied Iaido forms primarily to give them some kind of a background. So they were cross-training in the art of the sword. And one of the reasons it was necessary to do this is because O-sensei was simply not around. He was not available to teach these things. When O-sensei did finally start to appear more frequently in Tokyo, this was around 1955 or 1956, but even on those occasions, his presence at the dojo was very irregular and unpredictable. Also, O-sensei was fond of traveling, and usually on a monthly basis he would go down to the Kansai area, in the Osaka area, and also his hometown in Tanabe, and make the rounds to some of the schools there, and to see many of his old-time friends. So basically the people in Tokyo had really no opportunity to learn O-sensei's weapons in a systematic way. And actually O-sensei would become irritated or even angry if he saw someone pick up a sword or the aiki-ken, for example, at the Hombu Dojo and criticize them. He would shout that weapons can only be studied in a very controlled environment because they're too dangerous for casual practice. Now, some people have taken this fact that O-sensei prohibited the practice of weapons at Hombu Dojo as proof that he did not intend weapons to be a part of Aikido training. Well, I suppose one could develop that argument, but if we look a little closer at history, we'll find out that Morihiro Saito sensei taught at the Hombu Dojo for about a 10-year period from 1960 to around 1969 or 70. And during his teaching activity at the Hombu Dojo, he would teach Sunday classes which consisted of the aiki-ken and the aiki-jo. Now, of course, O-sensei knew about this and had no problem with this, and recognized that he was qualified to teach the ken and the jo. So this is kind of the historical background that will give you an idea of the two viewpoints and how they developed and the historical rationale for them. Now, as far as the conclusion to this debate, do we practice weapons? Do we not practice weapons? Does Aikido consist mainly of taijutsu, or is it a composite system including the taijutsu, aiki-ken, and jo? So I think really the answer is, in your individual training, who do you regard as the beginning of your lineage? Now, probably you're going to follow the example of your teacher, and probably your teacher will follow the example of his or her teacher in terms of their stand on whether or not weapons are important. Now, if you consider, for example, that the current doshu or the previous doshu is the beginning of your lineage and the formulator, if you will, of the curriculum, then you would probably believe that taijutsu formed the essential core of Aikido techniques, and that weapons practice is just subordinate and something you practice as an auxiliary to perhaps further understand some aspects of the art, but it's not really essential. If you regard O-sensei, the founder of the art, or for example someone like Morihiro Saito sensei, that lineage, then you would probably strongly believe that weapons are an integral part of Aikido and should be practiced and given strong emphasis along with the taijutsu forms. So I hope that this gives you a little better idea of how we got to where we are and why some people favor one viewpoint or the other. And it's really up to you, and it'll probably be determined by your individual lineage and your dojo and your teacher which viewpoint that you adopt. Well, once again, I would like to thank you very much for joining me, and we hope to see you again here soon for another video blog. Thank you very much.